It's time for another episode of the Shaun Tabatt Show, a podcast where I connect you with thought leaders from across the globe, dig into some of my favorite topics like personal development, marketing, spirituality, and pretty much any other shiny object that happens to catch my attention. Today, my special guest is Steve Miller, and we're going to be discussing the updated and expanded edition of his book, Uncopyable: How to Create an Unfair Advantage Over Your Competition. Steve, it is a great honor. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Shaun. There you go. See, look at that. The
Look at
expanded
that.
version, look right there. Expanded version, updated and expanded version. So thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be here. Not sure whether I'm the thought leader or the shiny object, but we'll find out as
Well,
we go.
you
All
had
right.
a gold foil sticker on the
You
top
see that?
on your book cover. So the book is our shiny object. You are the thought leader
Yeah.
and the expert.
That's because that little bad boy was number one there. So very shocking and surprising to my entire family. So
Well, you celebrate those successes wherever you find them. But Steve, for our conversation today, I always like to kick it off with a bit of the author's origin story. So for many of the people listening and viewing us, they are meeting you for the first time, sort of like I am today. So in terms
yep.
of your origin story, what do we need to know about you? Give us some context for who you are.
I'll try to keep it short. I'm sort of a Forrest Gumpish type of guy because which really led into this whole topic of being uncopyable because I grew up. My dad was the co-inventor of the 8-track tape player, and for most of the people that are watching this, they probably need to Google that and look it up or something like that. But anyway, that was a pretty big
I've
deal.
used them. I know what they are.
Well, they changed the music industry is really what they did. Short-lived, but they changed the whole music industry. And then I went on to, I was kind of a jock athlete kind of a guy, but I played golf for a short time on the PGA Golf Tour, made no money, and then when I left that, my college roommate, who came from an old Hollywood family, put me to work behind the camera just to kind of help me make some money before I figured out what I was going to do. And he got me doing some stunt work in Hollywood, so I've got that going for me. And but then he and I also kind of started getting into sales and marketing together. We did some private stuff together, and eventually I went out and got a real job and got into real business and was turned out I was pretty good at it. And I was much better at marketing than I was at sales. And I just kind of built a name for myself, and and would occasionally get companies calling me saying, "Hey, how did you do that? Where did you come up with that idea about that?" And really what it turned out to be was that I had such a uh, crazy, is the word disparate background, where
Mhm.
I had all these different kind of, I walked in these different worlds. It wasn't like somebody who grew up and their dad was a policeman, right? And so they walked that, I'm going to be a policeman, right? I hit so many different uh, um, industries, so to speak, and I met so many different people who were successful, creative people, but they all had different perspectives. And that kind of dialed me into this perspective of seeing things differently. And it helped me as a marketer big time. I was successful in the business, and eventually I figured out that I could go out and do it by myself. And so I did. I've been doing this for 34 years and essentially teaching companies. Number one is that most companies really misunderstand marketing. And number two is the idea of separating yourself from the competition. And that's where the word uncopyable comes from.
Well, and I can kind of relate to your story. I mean, I'm in publicity, I'm in marketing at this stage of my career, but I actually spent 10 years in the tech space doing
Yeah,
large scale
you
call
definitely
center
have that. You
management,
definitely
and
have that varied background. So yeah, no question. You
yep,
and I were talking about that earlier, and so without a doubt, you see, and when you bring all those in together into
right,
one small mind like mine, it gives you a different perspective.
yeah,
So
yeah,
you are
you have a
definitely
different
one of
lens.
those people too.
Well, and one more thing on your backstory, Steve. I'd just be curious to hear. In terms of, when you were finally starting to get some momentum or traction working in the marketing space, like, was there a certain like intersection of like talent and passion where you're like, man, this is exactly where I belong?
It was sort of that I was actually at a trade show in New York City a long time ago, and it was a trade show that was sort of it's called the Premium Incentive Show, which meant that it was not any particular industry. It's like the giveaways and incentives that companies will have and things like that. So a lot of different types of products could be there, and I had toys from my company, right? And then literally across the aisle from me was Apple Computer, and yeah, and they're offering computers as incentives, right? Well, I had been doing a little bit of consulting at the time for other people. But then at the end of the show, this guy comes walking up to me in our little booth. They had this huge Apple booth, you could imagine, right? And I had this little tiny, like maybe 200 square foot booth or something. And the guy came over and he said, "I'm the director of uh, marketing over here at Apple. And you guys just completely kicked our butt at this show." And he said, "I want to know how you did that." And so that was really the big opening for me, that I thought, "Oh, really?" I mean, I just thought it was just small businesses, but it turned out that the approach that I was taking, and so I worked with Apple. And then they introduced me some other people, and it was during that time that I quit my job because I thought, "Oh, I can go do this by myself and make more money." So that was really the big turnaround, but or not turnaround, but just the big pivot, for me in that moment where it validated what I was doing, and it also kind of gave me permission to think bigger.
Well, Steve, thanks for taking the time to educate us on your background, your origin story. I always find out where different authors and leaders started. I find that fascinating. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, you're
Uh,
right. Everybody has an interesting story. Everybody has an interesting story.
Very true. Very true. Well, let's start digging into some of the content from the book. So, in terms of somebody doing a pivot, a redirect, moving in a new direction, I always find the thing that people need to shift on is their mindset, how they're thinking, because they've gotten where they are in the lane they're in, thinking a certain way, believing certain things.
Right.
So, would love to have you take us into this next part of the conversation, talking to us about what does it mean to have an uncopyable mindset.
An uncopyable mindset means, well, let's start it. Let's back up here just a second, and let's think about it this way. All right. One of the things that I describe in my book is that um, when you are in an industry, and it doesn't matter what industry, really does not matter. Uh, Whether you're in the hospitality industry, whether you run a hotel or you run a restaurant, for example. In the restaurant world, when restaurants market themselves and promote themselves, they pretty much all do the same thing, right? In the hotel industry, when hotels do things to promote themselves, to market themselves, they all pretty much do the same thing. For example, um, you think about, say, the heavenly bed in a hotel. I'll often ask my audiences, or people, I'll say, who created the heavenly bed? And most of them don't remember. Now, it was the Westin hotels who did that, right? But right after the heavenly bed came out, all of a sudden another hotel comes out with, the sleep number bed, and then somebody else has, the big fluffy, pillow top bed, and so essentially what happens is that we are just looking at the competition within, I call it, our box. And if somebody else comes up with sort of a new idea in our box, then we copy it in some manner, try to improve upon it maybe a little bit, and then we do it that way. Or like if you're a restaurant and you say, "Oh gosh, we really want to promote our restaurant," you sit down with your staff, maybe your team members, and you say, "Well, what should we do to promote our restaurant?" And somebody will inevitably say, "Well, Gino's down the street is doing this. That's what we should do. So what that creates is kind of this myopic perspective of marketing. And what I what where the uncopyable comes in is that the last thing you want to do is conform with your competition. You know, in fact, I often say that competition does not breed innovation, it breeds conformity, because we're all looking at each other, copying them, they're copying us, we're copying those guys, and that type of stuff. So it gives us this very myopic perspective. And in order for us to get out of that, we have to create a sense of new eyes, fresh eyes, so to speak, where we don't look at our competition, we look somewhere else. We look outside of our box. We go look in other boxes. So, like for example, you know, like I was consulting for Caterpillar one time, and I wanted to just break their, you know, I wanted to bust those myopic glasses with the blinders on, you know, from them. So I took them to the American Girl store in downtown Chicago. And as we're getting there, I mean, literally, these guys wanted to rebel. You know, you're taking us to a doll store? And I said, yeah, I'm taking you to the coolest doll store on the planet. And I said, you got your notepads. I want you to go in there and I want you to ask yourself, what are they doing to market themselves and what can we steal? They were in there for 3 hours, you know, and they had such a good time and they came up with so many good ideas that they could use. And later on, as they started to implement some of these ideas that they got from the American Girl store, it was pretty funny because, of course, you know, they would say to me, "Don't you tell anybody that came from the American Girl store," right? You know, because they turned it into a construction industry idea, right? So the idea is that you want to be able to develop these fresh eyes, and because fresh eyes are going to help you see what other companies, what other industries, what other experiences are doing, and you see it from a different perspective. You see it with these fresh eyes of, oh, that's how Disney is making these people happy. You know, that we can do that too.
Well, and back to the story you shared about the mattresses, you know, it's maybe a minor win if you're the second guy who copies that idea, but you know, it gets to be when you're the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, everybody's already done it and it's not seen. In fact, it's not seen as innovative. It's kind of stupid at that point because everybody's already doing it. And In terms of, I liked what you shared with the Caterpillar story. And this is why a lot of people will bring in outside marketing resources or consultants just to help them, because if we're living inside the bubble, we're all drinking the same Kool-Aid, we're all breathing the same air, we're all operating in the systems that we've been operating in for many years. And so we're sort of handicapped and unable to even see, you know, outside of what we're doing, what's right ahead of us. So sometimes it takes that outside person, that outside force to jar us out of our complacency and move us in a completely different direction.
You know, and you say that a lot of companies do that, and frankly, I think it's not as many as, obviously I think it's not as many as should. I mean, a perfect example was Nordstrom. That I got to know Jim Nordstrom when he was still alive, and on the golf course. And one time he said, "I want to, you know, maybe hire you to come in and help us." And I said, and I've been mainly a B2B guy, although I do work with you know, a number of consumer companies. But I said to him, I said, "I know nothing about retailing," and he said, "That's exactly why we want to hire you." He said, because if we hire a retail consultant, he or she is just gonna tell us what they tell all the other, you know, our competitors. You know, we want to know what you think about stuff, and then we will figure out what's new to us. And that was one of the first times that it really started to hit me that the way you come up with these ideas is by pushing yourself outside of your typical comfort zone.
Well, and Steve, I'm a guy who's read lots of marketing books through the years, and I'll say what I really liked about your book is you've got some simple, easy to understand frameworks. It's easy to start hanging your stuff on the skeletons that you give us to start working with. And so, for this next part of the conversation, I'd love to have you lead us through those four M's of the marketing diamond, and maybe give us an example that we can follow along and understand the process that you walk people through.
Well, this is the four M's really comes from the unfortunate fact that most companies, and I'm talking mainly small businesses, but it's big companies can be just as guilty as anybody else, is they basically they're looking at marketing completely wrong, and they approach it backwards, so to speak. It like, for example, it's really common for small businesses to not really have marketing strategies. They don't plan marketing campaigns. The owner of a, I don't know, like a machine shop, that has, lathes and machines, and they create parts, for other companies, right? And that the person who owns that company and runs that shop probably was just really good at running a lathe, or one of the machines. And he said, I can have my own business, right? Well, then he comes in and then he finds out, well, he has to go out and find business. And so, of course, he copies the other shops. And whether he has success or not really doesn't make a big difference. But here's what happens is that, a salesperson from, and I'll use Valpak, for example. A salesperson walks into his front door and says, we do Valpak, and I can put you in 20,000 mailers, and it'll only cost you $600. And won't that be great? And the guy goes, yeah, that sounds great. So he goes out and he does Valpak, gets nothing out of it, right? And he's done. But he's saying, God, I did some marketing, but it didn't work. And so, it's easy to come up with companies that just keep doing stuff like that. Social media. You made the comment about shiny objects, right? Social media has always been a shiny object. It can be used as a powerful marketing tool for people, but that is not the beginning of the plan. The beginning of the plan is knowing who your market is. You have to know exactly who your market is. And the comparison that I use is I say it's sort of like going into a forest. And in that forest, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of creatures, in that forest. There are, there are ants, there are birds, there are different kinds of birds, there are, lizards, then there are bear in some forests, and some of them are black bears, some of them are brown bears, some of them are, koala bears, I don't know, teddy bears, what the heck, what do I know? And I say that, see, you're not going in there hunting all the animals in the forest. What you want to do is pick out an animal. And the one I use as my example is moose. I say, you want to hunt moose. And so when you want to hunt moose, how do you hunt moose? Well, you have to have moose bait. And then you have to have the right tools, right, for the moose, not the other animals, just for the moose. So the beginning is to understand your moose better than anybody else. You got to know your moose. And then once you, and part of understanding your moose is, where do they hang out? Number one is, what makes them hungry? What is it that they want all the time? What is a moose thinking about? I guarantee you a moose is thinking about food. That's what a moose is thinking about. And so how do that's moose bait. That's moose bait. And from a corporate perspective, from a company perspective, that's your message. So market is number one, knowing your moose, understanding your moose. And then number two, step two is, what message, what bait can you offer them that they stand up and they go, I want to talk to you about that, right? And then based on understanding, where do they hang out? Which forest are they hanging out in? Do they hang out on Facebook? Do they hang out on Instagram? Do they hang out on TikTok? Or do they read this magazine? Do they listen to this podcast? I just want to know where they hang out, because that's where I'm going to go. I'm not going to pick a medium to use like Valpak or like I say, TikTok or Instagram or something like that. I'm not going to use that if I don't already know that my moose are there and I can reach out to them very, very quickly. So that's why I say to people, don't don't come to me and say, how do I develop a Facebook strategy? Because that's like saying, how do I develop a fax machine strategy? That's really what it is. That's all it is. It's just a tool. And if your moose are not there, or if they're not there in the way that you can communicate with them easily, then I'm not going there. I'm going to find out the other way. So that's the beginning part of putting your marketing plan together.
Well, and I really like that you chose a moose as what we're going after, because I think it's some of the children's books I've read. And one of my kids' favorite stories is a story about the elusive moose that's super. He's sort of in every picture, but hidden, and you have to try to find him. And so it's just a different out of the box kind of an example. You hear very few people use moose examples in marketing fables or stories. So easy
Yeah,
to remember and just a
it's
little bit
easy to
different.
remember. Yeah, exactly right. And which I'll kind of come back to here in just a second. I'll do a callback on that here in a second because I think I know where you're going with your questions.
Yeah, well, and the great thing about that too, because if somebody says, "Hey, where's our moose?" They're going to know what you're talking about. So,
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
well,
Well, in fact, I can give you a specific example when I was working with Nordstrom, where this has all been developed through all my past connections and stuff. And I was in a meeting with them. Several of their top people are in that meeting, and we started talking about a particular plan, a campaign approach to go out. And like one of the people would say something like, "Well, what does Barbara think about that?" And they go, "Oh, well, she probably would say this, right?" And I'm like, "Who's Barbara?" Right? And then somebody else, we'd start the conversation would go a little bit farther, and somebody would say, "You think Barbara would be okay with that?" Now I'm thinking, who is this Barbara person, and why isn't she in this meeting? If she's so important, right? Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking I'm here with Jim Nordstrom. He's owner and president, one of the owners and president of this company. Who's Barbara? And I finally asked the question. They all laughed. They said, "Oh, sorry, we should have explained to you. Barbara is," and this was long before you ever heard of the term avatar. She said, they said Barbara is, we have pictured our customer, and we have defined our customer very clearly, and we have named her Barbara. We know how much money they make. We know which kind of, their home. We know, we've developed this picture of this person in our minds. And every time we come up with a new idea, we ask ourselves, how would Barbara feel about this? And that was kind of my first real introduction to developing a persona or an avatar or something like that. And that's the moose. That's their moose. They call their moose Barbara.
well, in terms of creating that customer persona or that avatar, I feel like it's something people read about and they might try it a little bit, but I feel like people don't put that into action, maybe quite to the extent that they need to. And remembering Jay Baer's book Talk Triggers and from last year. And one of the things he said is, "Gosh, you might have to actually get out there and interact with some real customers to figure out, what their avatar looks like." Because I feel like a lot of us have these ideas of who our customers are or who they think we should be, but oftentimes, from inside the fishbowl, those customers look far different than if we're starting to talk to them on the outside.
Oh, I'll tell you, it's I'm gonna be very blunt about this. Okay. If you do not have regular conversations with your moose to where you know them better than anybody else knows them, if you are running your business without that knowledge, you're arrogant. I mean, that's just the way it is that you think you know them better. You don't. None of us know them better. We have to go out and learn. We have to we have to connect with them, in multiple different ways, not just surveys, but also face to face.
Well, let's transition into the next thing I want to talk about. And that was, how do we go about creating our very own uncopyable box? You referenced this box earlier. And I was kind of excited about this one. So, to take us into this phase of the conversation.
Well, this is the fun part, right? I mean, the other part, the designing your box, kind of coming up with your, all right, who your moose is, where your moose is hanging out, what makes, what keeps your moose awake at night, right? What is the first thing on their mind when they come into work in the morning? What is all that stuff? And then you need to be able to figure out a way to communicate with them in a way that gets their attention, and then shares a message with them where they say, "Yeah, I want to talk to you some more about this." And so this is where you have to be able to show that you're different. People do not hire you, people do not buy from you because you're similar to the competition. People buy from you and hire you because they detect a difference. And it's a difference that is valuable, useful, interesting, um, um, something along the, it's that you are offering them something that they cannot get anywhere else, and so you have to be able to develop something that does that. Now, the first place to start, as I tell all of my clients, is the first place to start. It's just a pretty simple little Benjamin Franklin method. He used to, he always said that, if you have to make a decision between something, do this. You take a piece of paper and you draw a line across the top, and then you draw a line down the middle, and you put, something on one side, and then you put something on the other side. So what we do when I'm with a client is I say, all right, let's pick your top competitor, and and you're going to put your name on one side and their name on the other side. Now you're going to write down everything that you tell people are reasons why they should buy from you. Okay, you just put them all down there, right? Then on the other side, you say everything that the competition says why people should buy from them on the other side. Now you go through them and you look for what's the same, right? And you cross those out. If it's the same on both sides, you cross them out, and you hope and pray that there's something left on your side after you crossed everything out, right? Now here's the problem, that the vast majority of people, the vast majority of companies out there basically tell people that here's why you should do business with us, because we have the best quality product on the planet, we have the best customer service on the planet, and we have fair prices. Everybody says that. So how can that be, right? How can you be the best if everybody else says they're the best? Well, see, that's because those terms are vague generalities. And what I look for in these lists is I then say, when they get down and everybody says we have best customer service, I say cross them off. We have the best people, cross them off. All right. I say, what do you do in your customer service that nobody else does? What Quality products, essentially, it's very, very difficult to separate yourself because of a quality product, or even a quality, even if you sell services, it's very difficult to just say our service is better. You have to really, really dig down to find something that is different, or you have to create something that makes you different. You have to adopt something into your company. So like let's say Federal Express. If you remember Federal Express, when they first started, they would say when it absolutely positively has to be there overnight. That's what separated them from everybody else. It had to be there overnight. That was it. That was all. That's all that separated them from everybody else. I've got a client who makes these beautiful toolboxes. Like you might see in a machine. If you go to a auto repair or something like that, and you see these just beautiful, expensive, metal boxes, right? And they're very expensive, and most of them are handmade. They're not production lines or anything like that. And one of the things I asked my client, I said, if somebody didn't like their box, or if there was something wrong with their box, and would you give them their money back? He said, yes, of course. He said, I've always had that. I'll be happy. He said, in fact, I often joke that I have a 55-year money back guarantee, no questions asked, 55 years. And so I got a big laugh out of that. And I said, you know what? We can own that. We can own that. And so we started developing this campaign that said, 55-year, no questions asked, money back guarantee on these boxes, right? And nobody can copy that. Nobody can copy that. So sometimes you have to create something like that. You have to, if you say that you can use customer service as an example, but you have to be very specific about what does that, when you say you have the best customer service, what exactly does that mean? Are you saying that when you call our office, that number one, a human being answers the phone, and whoever answers that phone now becomes your point of contact to solve that problem? You're not going to be handed off to somebody else. You're not going to be that person owns the problem. So the thing is to, number one, is that if you are using vague generalities, which you are, okay, whoever's watching this right now, I know you are, you all do, you all do. I haven't found one yet who came to me and said, oh yeah, I got that. No, you say you have best customer service, best product. Everybody's got the best product. Stop saying that. Because if your product's not any good, they're not going to be talking to you anyway. And you're never going to have the cheapest price. Stop doing that. So you need to look for something, and and you need to go outside. Again, use those fresh eyes I'm talking about. Get outside and look at other businesses who are not really related to your business, not really related to your industry, and go say, okay, what are they doing to separate themselves from the crowd? Go back to Nordstrom. Everybody knows Nordstrom. And the thing that I got involved with was the Nordstrom Myth. Okay. What we realized, everybody says they have the best customer service. And sometimes and this has happened more than once, where I'll go into a business and they'll say, yeah, we have the best customer service. And our goal is to be known as the Nordstrom of our industry from a customer service perspective. And I always say, how will you know that you are the Nordstrom of the industry? And why do you say Nordstrom? What is it about Nordstrom? And what they often come up with is they say, oh, did you ever hear the story about the guy who brought 4 tires back to the Nordstrom, the Anchorage Nordstrom? And he wanted his money back for the 4 tires. And the manager of the store gave him back his money, even though Nordstrom has never sold tires. Right? That's part of the Nordstrom myth. See? And and what we realized was that and Nordstrom has never once advertised that they have the best customer service in the world. Not once have they ever done that. We've all heard stories of world-class customer service at Nordstrom. Nordstrom has never promoted any stories. They let the stories become myths. They encourage speakers and authors, and people like us to share their stories. And we become their mouthpieces. And that's where the Nordstrom myth came from. And I was part of that I was part of that. Of coming up with a way to share the Nordstrom myth. And everybody that shops at Nordstrom, if they shop there for a while, everybody eventually has a Nordstrom story. And then they share it with everybody else. So it's not like there's a step-by-step, okay, here's what you do, A, B, C, D, to go become uncopyable. There's a whole bunch of different things that you can approach, that you can study, different ways, like I said, like with Caterpillar going to the American Girl store. right? I've taken people into, I took Delphi Automotive Aftermarket, and we went into the Apple store, and they just completely stole everything about the Apple store, turned it into Delphi Automotive shops, and they just, they just totally stole it. Which I say, hey, that's cool, that's fine. You're not in their industry. Apple, not only does Apple not care, they don't even know. They don't even know. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to do that. A lot of different ways to do that. I mean, I can share some stuff like for me, for example, one of the things, is that I say to people, I'm going to teach you how to be uncopyable. All right. Well, I better be uncopyable myself. Right. So what have we done here to make sure that we are walking that talk? Well, number one, I'm not a marketing consultant. I'm first of all, I'm Kelly's dad, and I am a marketing gunslinger. Okay. This accomplishes a couple of things. Number one, it tells people what my priorities are. Kelly first, my job second. Number two, marketing gunslinger, it's a joke, right? I'm laughing about it. Who calls themselves a gunslinger? I do. And it kind of gives an idea of that I'm a little bit odd, which I am. And and then everything we do from we essentially, and this is something I will repeat again, I'm sure, before we get done here, is we look at what all the other marketing consultants are doing, and we do not do that. I haven't worn a tie in 20 years. Work out of the home. I've got Doctor Who back here on my wall, right below my eagle, right from was it Isaiah 40, I think, back there. And and I mean, I got more stuff over here. I don't have it right here, but I used to have a Target teddy bear that I got at the TED conference one time when I was speaking there. And I do everything that I can to not be like the other people. We pick the color orange, for example. And so everything we do is orange. When we send stuff out to people, the color, my book is orange, right? My book, it's orange. So, and the idea is that, we connect the color. It becomes an anchor and a trigger with people. Is that we hit them with so much orange that we say to them, when you see orange, we want you to think of, how can I be uncopyable? Where am I right now? Why am I seeing something orange? What's happening around it? And it triggers them to open their eyes. But at the same time, it reminds them about me. And our favorite story about that is with Gallery Furniture down in Houston, which is actually famous because of a guy named Mattress Mac who owns the company. And he's the Houston guy that when they had the hurricane a couple of years ago, he went on Facebook and he said, if you have been displaced by the hurricane, you can come and sleep on our beds and our couches and our mattresses, in our stores. He became famous for that, right? And he was also famous last year because he offered money back guarantee money. Not money back guarantee. He offered money back if the Houston Astros won the World Series last year. Anybody who bought his mattresses would get their money back, 100% of their money back. And then he went out and he placed like $1 million bet, on the Astros to try to cover himself. He became famous about that. Well, he read my book, and he had that, and he had read it, and went a few weeks, and then the Houston Astros. He was at a Houston Astros game, and he's sitting there, and the Astros come running out, and their main color is orange. And he said, he saw all this orange coming out, and he thought to himself, Steve Miller. He called me the next morning and hired me to come in and consult for him. So these are these are like a lot of random things, but it's essentially that's, there are random ways of doing it, but you start with that comparing yourself to the competition. You got to find that at least one thing that you can own, that that the competition cannot own.
Well, we've talked a little bit, Steve, about how to some degree the customer has to have a voice or a weigh in some of the process. But and I'm thinking, whether it's a small company, a large company, in terms of walking through this process, who within the company needs to have a voice into this process, and then also like what's the time frame? I feel like a lot of people, they get excited again, a shiny object, and they'll put in a lot of energy up front, and then things kind of slow down. So, is there also an ideal timeline to walk through this?
It depends on how you're using it. Okay, so for example, we have a client named Refrigeration Services Corporation, RSC, outside of Toledo. I think I mentioned them. And um, they uh, they were the president had read my book, got very excited. They had their annual 2-day retreat for all their top executives. And she went in there. And one of the things, I talk about a color, for example, like, owning a color, but I talk about these tags and these anchors and stuff. And one of the things I also say is like, sit down with your people and come up with, can you come up with one word that describes your company right now, or what you want your company to be known for. And they spent 2 days and they came up with the word relentless. And so the name Refrigeration Services Corporation, their logo is RSC. So in that meeting, they brought it back and took it to a company-wide meeting with everybody else saying, we want our word to be relentless. And then one of the employees came up with the idea was, well, we have RSC. We could make that stand for relentlessly servicing customers. And so then they all started saying, okay, so what does that mean? And then and as a company, they embraced this idea of relentless and really went after, the idea is everybody owned it. Everybody in the company owned it, and they would come up with their own ideas of how to be relentless. Then, when the pandemic hit, and all of a sudden, we're in bad shape, right? And businesses going out the window for a lot of companies and stuff like that. She said she had a kind of a company-wide meeting with the people outside in the Toledo office. And she said, they were kind of talking about, okay, what do they need to do now? And one of the employees stood up and said, you know what? Now the word relentless means us. Relentlessly, standing for our company. What can we do during this crisis? What can each one of us as employees do during this crisis? And so, it was just amazing to listen to her share that story with us about how, just one word, and she, and I'm really, I mean, I'm very humble, to say that she said to us, she said, that changed our company. That totally changed our company, and really had, ultimately, it has nothing to do with marketing. It has everything to do with the company.
Steve, when you think of, say, maybe somebody's going to sit down, they're going to read the book before they talk to their team or people in their organization about it. When they get to that last page, they close that back flap. What's that core message, that resounding drumbeat that you hope each and every person hears when they spend time
Well,
in
I
the
think
pages
it's
of
two.
this book?
Yeah, it's two things. Like I said, one is that you have to look at your competition and not do what they're doing. Okay, you have to push yourself, climb out of your own box, and go study other boxes. That's the main thing you got to do. You got to really push yourself to have new eyes, fresh eyes, however you want to look at it, and look for ideas that you can take from other companies, other industries, whoever. I mean, if Caterpillar can take an idea from a doll store, don't tell me you can't take ideas from other industries too. And that's the main thing about this of the book is I just want people to recognize they have to be different. That's why people choose us.
And Steve, for the listeners, the viewers who'd like to connect with you, find out more about your book, find out more about your business, where should we go on the web to do that?
Well, you can go to, well, first of all, is it okay if I give them something? You know,
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
please.
I got a little thing called, we call it the 3 steps to branding. Real simple. I think it's 1 or 2 pages or something like that. That I've set up a page for you, and the name of our company is The Adventure. It is. It's just the adventure. And that came from the stuntman stuff. But so our website is theadventure.com, theadventure.com, one word. And so if you go to theadventure.com/Shaun dash Tabatt, then you can go in there and you can sign up and get a free copy of the 3 steps to, I think we call it speed branding, is what my smoking hot wife calls it. And if you just have questions, or want to know some more information, you can go to theadventure.com. But obviously we want to tell them, go get the book. Get the book, read it. It's great. It's very fast reading, mostly 1-syllable words, like I talk. And and if they got questions, the book tells them how to reach me, and I'm happy to answer any questions they got.
Well, like we do with every episode, we'll have detailed links in the show notes, places where you can connect with Steve and pick up your own copy of the book as well. It's time to bring this episode of the Sean Tabatt Show to a close. Many thanks for being a part of my conversation with Steve Miller. Once again, our book today, nope, there we go. Once again, our book today was Uncopyable: How to Create an Unfair Advantage Over Your Competition. Again, if you'd like to get that free bonus material that Steve talked about a moment ago, head on over to theadventure.com/Sean Tabatt. And again, to pick up your own copy of the book, go wherever great books are sold. It's available from Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any of the places that you're used to picking up your books. And Steve, I just want to say thanks for sharing with us today. You've shared a wealth of information. You're a great guy to talk to. Really appreciate you investing in us today.
Well, thank you, Shaun. I really enjoyed myself, and I hope you guys got some good stuff out of this. I would just always say, just remember, be uncopyable.